Hey y'all, welcome to I Got a Story to Tell. I'm your host, Niambi Kiesha, holistic wellness practitioner, hoodoo spiritist, and Bronx native. And during our time together, I will share some of my musings on all things life, spirit, plants, and parenting. So get comfortable and let's dive right in.
Okay.
All right. So, welcome
Thank
to
you.
this episode of the I Got a Story to Tell podcast. Again, I am your host, Niambi Kiesha. I am a holistic wellness practitioner. I am a hoodoo spiritist. I'm a yogi, and I'm also just a girl from the Bronx, right? And so we are just going to spend time together talking all things life, spirit, plants, and parenting. But for these next few episodes, like I shared in the first episode, we're going to do a series on community building. What does community building mean? How it can look in our lives, why it is important in this season that we find ourselves in, and how we can adopt some practices to make sure that we are building a community around ourselves, around our children, around our families that is supportive for where we desire to go in the future.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in and
Yes.
introduce my very first guest. So this is super exciting. Um, this is someone that is very special in my life, carries a lot of significance and a lot of weight, but is also someone that came to mind immediately when I thought about what it is that we need to be sharing as we are moving into this new season, this new world order, if you would call it that. I shared on the last episode that we are finding ourselves at a time in our history where life and the world as we knew it is shifting
Mhm.
drastically. And there are those of us that are doing work, pouring in, contributing to the building of what will be life as future generations know it
Yeah.
for decades to come, right? So I would like to introduce Sensei Kwabene
Yes.
to the I Got a Story to Tell
I the
podcast.
story
Thank
to
you for joining.
tell.
I am happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. This is really a fun honor. People use that word a lot. It's an honor. This is a fun honor. It's a fun honor because one, our family affinity and you have invited me as your first guest, and so that's an absolute honor. But then also just what you're doing and what you're bringing light to with your I Got a Story to Tell podcast. I love the idea about community building. You certainly planted us right in the ground to start this conversation with what you are doing and starting off with the new year and thinking about how to bring community in a space where everything seems disjointed and we have a changing world and changing dynamic and people's lives are really affected by what's going on. So yes, I am Sensei Kwabene of Dominyin Dojo. Dominyin Dojo is we call it 3D Dynamic Dominyin Dojo. And we're a dojo recently opened up here in Westchester, New York, in the Bronx. But more to the point, martial arts has been something that has informed my lifestyle and informed my thinking,
Mhm.
in addition to my very center based spiritual perspectives. And so I would like to think, and hopefully it comes out, the perspectives that I hold about community building. I do have some thoughts to say, but I'm going to follow your cue as the host of I Got a Story to Tell podcast and try to stay in line with the thread that we weave here in this conversation. But I'm Sensei Kwabene. I call myself your beneficial sensei. So I'm sensei to everybody watching at this point.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so you hit on two things, right? So one, you said that martial arts has been, I might be paraphrasing because this is what I had in my mind, but pivotal in your life, right? So to
Mhm.
Like I said, this is my brother. And so I grew up in a martial arts world. I would put it that way. I am not a martial artist, right? So I will share, I will share my martial arts experience.
Mm,
So early on, and I know this is, I believe this is where you started, but you share your story if you started prior to that. But the Harlem Goju,
yes.
which is on 135th Street, across
Fine.
the street from Harlem Hospital, right? And I spent time in that space. Sensei Kwabene spent time in that space. Sensei Kwabene spent time in that space honing his craft. I spent time in that space running around, and I fell once and knocked my teeth up into my gums. I was traumatized, and I went home and told mom that karate was not for me. So that is the extent of my martial arts experience. But when I think about martial arts, when I think about it growing up, seeing you in it, seeing other siblings practice, I feel like early on, if you don't know about it, you think it's all about the fight. You think it's fighting, right? But then as I grew into my own awareness, I learned to understand that it is discipline, right? And the thing that it's akin to me recently, so we are from New York, but I live in Charlotte now,
Yeah.
and I recently went and got my concealed carry license. And I remember in that class, the instructor made clear that having your concealed carry license or having a weapon doesn't make you more powerful. It actually makes you more responsible. If you draw that weapon and you have not tried everything else, you will be the one that will be held liable. And so that's what I think about martial arts, that the reality is you have the power in your hands to
Yeah.
potentially take someone else's life,
Hmm.
and you are tasked with moving through the world with that and not acting on it all of the time. So to me, as I've grown, I realize martial arts is the epitome of discipline, right? It requires the epitome of discipline. So I'm going to ask you to talk about that. You can talk about what, growing up in martial arts or wherever you want to go with it, but that idea of you have a skill that now requires you, if you are someone of integrity and moves in a certain way. I mean, because there's some people that may have the skills that's out here loosey goosey.
Correct.
Talk
Correct.
to us about that, the discipline that comes with being a martial artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for reflecting on those times of us growing up in the Harlem Goju community. It is a martial art, it's a form of karate. The discipline does stem from a physical self-defense discipline and mindset potentially, and the art and style of Goju karate. But, like Niambi Kiesha has said, we grow in different levels or we grow in different ways once we start taking on the practice. And it takes on new meaning at different levels and at different times. So now, at this time, having been a student of Goju martial arts since the age of 9, and that has been, 45 plus years ago, there have been a new awareness that has come to my mind in terms of what martial arts can mean in a lifestyle, what martial arts can mean to a living perspective or a lived perspective, and to the point of what our host has said about responsibility,
Mhm.
responsibility of carrying a concealed weapon or an armed weapon, and the responsibility of being a martial artist, but also the responsibility that comes with what martial arts has developed inside of us. This will tie directly into my thoughts on community building. And when the host leads us in that direction for the conversation, I'll tie it in. But yeah, martial arts has been a governing force in my life, more so as of late. It has not always been that way. As an adolescent or as a young person, and then an adolescent, and then as a young adult, it went through stages of understanding and stages of development in terms of my personal awareness. But I think all of those stages have planted the seeds for how I've developed, how I've emerged, how I have uncovered more of the essence of who I am as a person, as a man, and even as a martial artist today.
Hmm. Yes, yes. So thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I wrote down was when you said it hasn't always had this place in my life. And something that I shared in the last episode about when we find ourselves in times of transition or difficult times, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to lean in, to go inward, to do our own deep dive. I am also a yoga instructor, and one of the terms that we use in yoga is called svadhyaya, and that is self-study, right?
Mhm,
And so we all have these moments, right? These crossroad moments or these moments in life, these shifts generationally or age or experience
mhm,
where something else can come up to the surface and emerge. And so I'm going to head right into the community building piece.
mhm,
But again, for me, I shared, I'm always looking at things through my spiritual lens, right? And so that, and I reference the law of attraction often. And so I don't believe that anything happens by chance, right? So for you to land in a place where martial arts is pivotal in your life right now, what it means to you, what it has evolved into, ultimately leading you to founding Dominyin Dojo, I believe that timing was
mhm.
orchestrated
Yes.
by Spirit, Universe, God for
Yes.
this season that we are in.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
this is why we need to elevate as we have walked through these timelines, these experiences, this spiritual awakening, and all of those things. It's for us to land right here, right
Yes.
now,
Yes.
to add the building blocks to this
Yeah.
new world order that
Yeah.
we see unfolding right before our eyes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
There is absolutely this universalism
Hmm.
to martial arts. There's a universal intelligence that helps us navigate the world, that actually opens portals and windows of opportunity for us to move into. Our
Yeah, yeah.
spayaya, in self-analysis. This is really the measure of what I believe a good sensei does, of who a good sensei is. Am I a master martial artist? Absolutely, I am, and I enjoy that. But a good sensei helps us to exercise what our host has called spayaya. That a good sensei will help and the student to develop in ways beyond just what they do on the martial arts floor, but to develop internally, to have levels and degrees of self-awareness, to have intentions about personal growth.
Hmm.
And so every Wednesday, uh, there is a 15-minute segment that I do called Moment with a Master, and it's a mindfulness segment.
Hmm.
And in the mindfulness segment, I explore what comes to me. You talked about the messages that you received in
Hmm.
2024 in terms of what you ought to be doing at that point in time. And so we each get these opportunities, these intersections in life to show up in unique ways. And we get these opportunities that come in messages in different forms. And oftentimes we find that we miss the message or we bypass it or we aren't attuned to hear the voice or the cadence of that which is speaking to us. And we'll find that we are repeating situations and repeating, experiences that don't serve us or that are distasteful to us. And we wonder, well, why does this keep happening to me? And there it is, spayaya, right? There it is, the opportunity to develop
Spad. SV.
a spot by ya ya spy
Spad. Yeah, yeah. Yes. Good
by.
job.
Listen,
Sorry.
My Bronx jaw doesn't particularly work like that. To put an S and a V together, that's a little bit of a. I'll need a class on that. But spy ya ya. All
Yes.
right, we have that opportunity to really tie in, and so many people may see that dash in between their time here on Earth not fully developed, not fully fulfilled, not fully actualized. And we can go on in life. We could get past. I call it coping. I
Mhm.
call it oftentimes we are coping with life. We may not even be suffering. We may be doing all right. But have we fully actualized that dash? Have we put in, or are we open to discovering what it is that we might be called to fulfill in this lifetime?
Mhm.
Because it is, and I'll pass the mic back, but it is my thought and belief that we each have a unique cup to fill while
Mhm.
we're here.
Yeah.
And we can or can't. There are many who don't ever. But my call and my invitation to people is, you know, let's do the work of developing ourselves individually so that we could be strong assets and contributors to the communities that we belong in.
Yes. Yes. This is so good. This is so good because I think oftentimes people will hear me say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. That's just a saying that I have. And what I mean by that is, there are things that may call out to someone else that may not call out to everyone, right? So, one thing I want to come back to is I want to ask you to, well, let me do that right now. Can you give us, is there a definition for sensei, or what is a sensei?
Yeah, yeah. Pretty directly translated teacher,
Yeah.
teacher,
Okay.
right? But it does carry the meaning based on what the person brings to the role, almost like pastor,
Mm-hmm.
right? It does carry, uh, um, you do get an impression of a type of person when you think of pastor, when you think of sensei. Sensei simply translates directly into teacher, but my belief is that the quality of the sensei matters.
Yeah,
Who the sensei is matters. How
absolutely.
the sensei pours into the life of their students matters. And so each sensei doesn't hold the same, characteristics
Mhm.
one to the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, so I appreciate that because what I was going to say is a number of the things that you shared are mirrored in my yoga practice,
Mm,
right? And so where you call sensei, we call guru, right? So our guru, we have a guru, it's exact same thing. It is the teacher, but it is understood that it's coming from this place of not managing or forcing or strong arming, that your life becomes the example, becomes the curriculum. How you move through the world becomes the lessons for your students, right? So, guru. And then also, when you shared that we have people that can find themselves in these constant loops of the same experiences, same behavior. So, from my spiritual lens, that took me to the space of karma, right? If you do not learn the lesson, spirit will bring it right back. They will bring it right back in another person. They will bring it right back in the next city you move to. They will bring it right back in the next job you move to. They will bring it right back in the next church you go to. They'll bring it right back in the next dojo that you go to. They'll bring it right back in the next yoga studio that you go to
yeah,
because it is part of our curriculum to learn the lesson to break the loop. So I say that to say I'm grateful that, again, doing this series, everything that I say may not resonate for people. Some people might be like, Niambi, please, it's too woo-woo and with the chakras and the svadhyaya and all the things. Like, I don't want it. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, I'm gonna give you a few different people that's saying the same thing because it's more than one way to skin a cat. And at the end of the day, we're gonna have to go inward and do our own work.
yeah,
So the topic of our episode,
yes.
how do we tie this into community in this climate that we are finding ourselves? I want to pose two questions, then I'm going to pause because I want to allow your voice. What does community mean to you? And why do you feel it is important to build, create, and pour into it in this season, in this climate?
Wow. Those are powerful questions. What does community mean to me? and why is it important to do the work, I'll paraphrase, that I'm doing in this climate, in this season,
Yeah.
and at this time, right? Very, very powerful questions. And then, maybe a little bit later, we'll talk about what are the conditions that we're operating under now, because those are unique and those can be constraints in a lot of ways to the work that we do. But community, man, wow, community. Well, let me put it in the context of the dojo,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's a microcosm, I believe. The microcosm, the doors of the dojo are open. And the doors of the dojo are open to those who would come and be aligned with the work that we are doing there in the dojo. They'll be connected with the training that we do there in the dojo, and they will be interested in the well being of the dojo. So they're going to be aligned with the work, they're going to be aligned with what we are there for, and they're interested in the well being of the dojo. And I think those are some key points and characteristics of what people optimally bring to a community,
Mm-hmm.
right? We are a coalition, a collection of interested parties. I could sometimes speak very proper, but I try to put words together that have meaning, that
Mm-hmm.
convey what I want to say,
Mm-hmm.
right? We are a coalition or a collection of interested parties, of people who are interested in the same thing. A
Mm-hmm.
soccer team, you know, a glee club, a cheerleading squad,
Mm-hmm.
a book group. These are communities, these are unique communities, and they collect together. We see that likes collect together. And so, just jumping back to me as a sensei, it's my job to set the tone and the tenor of what Dominion Dojo is about so that I can attract the community that will generate around and inside of Dominion Dojo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Community is that collection of those who have the same interests. And so I'll pivot a little bit to the second question, and what at this time, or why at this time, is it important to pay attention to how we might pour into building community. And I think, and you could shift me back if I get off track with the question, but I think it's important at this period and point in time because we have moved beyond the place of being in proximity of being able to thrive and advance. That challenge has been increased. The water has gotten hotter.
When you're saying we move beyond that proximity, are you saying we are further away?
I'm
We're not in
thinking,
proximity.
yeah, I'm thinking that we're further away and it's
Yeah.
harder. We talk about having a permanent underclass, and we talk about the middle class, and then we talk about, the 1%, and we talk about the gap between the rich and the poor. And, so we aren't really in proximity, I'm thinking, to thriving in the way that we could. There had been this concept of, we're in the United States of America and talking about the American dream. Because now I'm thinking that this podcast may be being watched when it's released in, Senegal and Nigeria
Yes,
and
yes,
Budapest.
absolutely. Speak
So
it.
we gotta tell people
International.
where we're at right now.
Exactly.
But here, there's this concept, called the American dream, and we're aware that it seems to have lost its grasp. It seems to have lost its proximity in our space. A lot of people don't have any much hope anymore,
Hmm.
or they don't have the intention of attempting to manifest real gains in their life and their world. And people are settling back in on ways to cope. We see that the legalization of marijuana in this country has proliferated in many states. And, we might have different ideas on why that should be or whether it should be. But at the end of the day, what we could possibly agree on is that these are means and measures that give people an outlet.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, they're not always medicinally related, right? They give people an outlet and ways to cope. And since we couple that lack of hope and the increase in ways to cope, we see people are maybe not as tied in as they might once have been to what's happening with them personally. And so our invitation to community building, to me, my response to the call is really invitation to help build up individuals within a community.
Mm-hmm.
Like my focus as a sensei is not so much on building Dominion Dojo. That's going to happen, and it is my interest, but it's interested and invested in building individuals who will make up the community.
Right.
Because the reason this work is important is because it becomes more of a demand. It becomes more of an imperative. It becomes more important. It becomes more necessary. And it becomes necessary to get people in a position to think about how we can thrive. But
Mm-hmm.
also, there's some who are just trying to reach the measure of surviving
Mm-hmm.
and are falling underwater because continued pressures, the environment has changed, the economic environment has changed, housing has changed, our food access and distribution channels have changed and can be disrupted. Stress levels and mental health levels are different now. So the work that we have is cut out for us. It's a work and a labor of responding to a high calling to have an impact on the lives of individuals who might come into our orbit, who might come into our midst.
Right.
So
Yes.
let me pause there.
Nope. So thank you. So because what I heard you say, so I heard you say a few things. One is around what is the definition of community, right? And so that you are building a community with Dominion Dojo,
Yeah,
and there will be alignment in that community. And
yeah,
the reason why that's important is because it allows you to, like you said, set the tone, set the vision, set the direction, and trying to convince people to follow your direction is an exercise in exhaustion, right? I don't do that. I
good,
don't try to convince people, right?
good, good, good.
So, but that's why I think it's important because what I shared, so I shared in the last episode that if you are an individual that's looking for community, you should be looking for a space that is in alignment with what you feel, is in alignment with your values, is in alignment with the place and direction that you're moving, that you feel a level of trust and safety. Those were some of the tenets that I said individuals looking for community, seeking community, should look for in those spaces. And you hit the nail on the head that then sometimes the first step to seeking out your community
Mhm.
is getting clear on the inside. Because I talk to so many people and
Right.
I can ask people, what do you want? And their default is, well, I don't want this and I don't want that. But what do you want? Well,
Mhm.
I don't want to be, but what do you want?
Yes.
And a lot of people struggle with giving language to what they want. And so sometimes the first step, sfad yaya, right, is going to keep coming back up that you might have to be clear and start to flush some stuff out and acknowledgement, right? So we're not going to go down the legalization of marijuana or any of that. But what I will say is, if you need, I've talked to people that have had an acknowledgement that yes, I use it because it simmers out my anxiety, but I acknowledge that I'm not as productive. I acknowledge that I am, moving at a slower pace. So just acknowledging that for yourself,
Yeah.
in a safe place without judgment to acknowledge that, because we have to have the awareness in order for us to take a first step of stepping into Dominion Dojo, of connecting with a spiritual advisor, of going to a church, even, right?
Hmm.
You have to at least have a first step of saying, this is what I'm seeking out. This is what I'm looking for. These are some of the things that I would like to shift and change.
Hmm.
So, I appreciate you sharing what community is, and that it's important for people to be in alignment when they come in to the community. Now, you don't have to have all your T's dotted,
Correct.
all your T's crossed and your I's
Right.
dotted.
Correct.
As an individual, you should want to be in community with other individuals that are in alignment. It makes the process smoother. The
Hmm.
other thing that I heard you say is that there are some individuals in this season and in this climate
Mhm.
that need support simply to make it through the day.
Correct.
Day at a time, make it through the week, right? And that is the real purpose and driving force for me wanting to have these conversations to
Mhm.
let people know there is support out there. I shared, I feel like in this little stretch that we're in, fear is being peddled. I mean, almost worse than the crack epidemic.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if I can keep you in a place of fear and panic and distraction,
Hmm.
then I can cause you to not trust anyone. We're just coming off of a pandemic where people are still just learning how to get back to being in physical contact with other individuals and being in public spaces, right? And so, what I really wanted to lift up in these conversations is that there are community builders. There are individuals like myself, like Sensei Kwabene, like the other guests that are going to come on, that are
Yeah.
trustworthy, that are safe spaces, that
Yes.
are intentionally building community, but you have to come out your house.
Yeah.
You have to begin to seek them out. And the first step towards seeking them out is knowing what it is that you're looking for. So
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, could
is
I add something to that?
mhm.
Mine did my sound change? I had to plug in my device. Can you hear me clearly still?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Yes, what we attract and who we attract, the law of attraction. So
Mhm.
you touched on a couple of things. I'm going to take the host mic for a second.
Okay.
Talk about the law of attraction, and who we are pulling into our orbit
Mhm.
to have an effect on their life and their world. I think of it about being on the beach. And not everyone is going to be close up to us on the beach. The beach might span some distance, but we might be affecting people a ways out who we don't even know we're affecting. They
Mhm.
may not be the ones to come close up into the close proximity of our push toward community building, but they might be a distance away. And so the law of attraction is effective there. And then as they walk and they get stronger and they get built up, walking through the challenges that they face, then they can come a little bit closer into that and be a little bit more closely aligned with
Mhm.
what we are doing and who we are. But my invitation, I'm sure it's yours too, is an open invitation. That's why I say the doors of the dojo are open, because I do realize there will be people who come and have to work out some things in themselves.
Mhm.
I set a high bar.
Yeah.
I set a particularly high bar, but that that high bar is for people to reach to, not a bar to beat them back.
Mhm.
And the invitation and the call is to be the best and to maximize and actualize the best of who we are,
Mhm.
to come to the floor of the dojo and develop and put our feet on the floor and develop from wherever we start to develop. All of us started a white belt.
Mhm.
So all of us really have a new beginning when we come to the floors of the dojo,
Mhm.
for the most part, to one degree or another. And I'll say also that you talked about how people can be aware of what their motives are, what motivate, what pushes them, their
Right.
intention.
Mhm.
And there is a process that I use to frame my thoughts about what we do, and it's called VCPIFE: vision, clarity, and purpose. Vision, clarity, and purpose.
Mhm.
Developing those are hard won perspectives to get a good solid grasp of. We got to do some work
Mhm.
to have vision with clarity and to understand how our purpose is aligned with it.
Mhm.
That in of itself, for me, that has been a multi-decade operation.
Mhm.
Over time, I've become more clear. Over time, I've become more aware. Over time, I've been more, you know, in on it, on the pulse of what that is for me over time. And it's
Mhm.
taken time and it's taken svayaya to do and to over periods to really walk into this season that I'm at now. It hasn't happened. I just woke up and snapped and it was there. So
Mhm.
the dojo is there to help us all walk through those seasons and times where we can develop into the best of who we are. So I
Mhm.
say vision, clarity, and purpose first, and then set our intent with focus and execution. Set our intent with focus and execution. And then we're moving in a dynamic of developing the core of who we are. And it will be challenges. It will be things that, cause us to trip up or that we have to work through. We may need help working through it. And that's fine. Whatever that medium is for each one of us, we encourage to develop the fullness of who we are so that that dash between our beginning days and our last days is as robust as it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So vision, clarity, purpose.
Yes,
And then you want to move with intent, focus, and execution.
absolutely.
Yeah. And the one thing I want to come to that you mentioned is this is hard work.
It
This
is.
is hard work.
It
It
is.
didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen for you overnight. It didn't happen for me overnight. But that's the blessing of community, right? Community can become the safety net. Community can become the place where you can do the hard thing, whether the hard thing is part of your internal work, facing whatever emotion, fears, historical things, or once you come out of that, if the hard thing is you want to start a business and how do you step out and how do you try community and building your tribe that can provide resources, right? That's another thing. When we come into community, we can come in at all different levels. And the other thing that I shared that I think is important about community is that it is reciprocal, right? So this piece ties into my hoodoo practice, which is, I won't go all the way into it, but in hoodoo, it is based on ancestor veneration.
Mm.
We learn that ancestor veneration needs to be a reciprocal relationship, right? So it should not be a constant prayer and asking of spirit to do, give, deliver, protect me, cover my kids, keep us safe, provide, and we never give back, right? And so that is where when we have altars, when we give offerings, it is a reciprocal relationship. And I think when you come into community, you should be prepared to not just take whatever it is that you have to give, whatever you are gaining from community. What can you also share? Can you be a listening ear? Can you give somebody a ride to class on Tuesday night? Can you make sure when you get your baby off the bus, you get somebody else baby off the bus? If you
Yeah.
got, extra basil in your garden, how do we pour back? Because I believe it does good for us. You talked about having a lack of hope. And oftentimes when we are in hopeless states, we are programmed to think we need to ask, ask, ask. It's that scarcity mindset. I need, and we're hoarding. But it does us good to be able to do for someone else,
Yes.
see the joy in what they receive from us. So when we go into community, I think it's important to know what you desire to receive, but also what can you give? What can you contribute? How do you make sure this cup continues to overflow?
Yes. 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 Cup overflow. Let's.
Thing I do want to get your thought about one
Okay.
a thought when we talk about these times that we're in, right? So I've also heard the narrative of, as crazy as the world may seem right now,
Mhm.
that Black folks just, we're choosing not to participate. We're choosing to, there's a meme going around. I'm sure, I don't know if you've heard about all the line dances and the fan song.
Mhm.
And they're like, while the world is burning down, Black folks are line dancing because we're going to figure out how to find our joy, or we are stretched thin and beyond the idea that we have to carry all of the chaos on our backs. So, what are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about how, aside, not aside from community, but in conjunction with community, while individuals may be looking for community, looking to build their tribe, how do you stay sane in these moments?
It's so dynamic. The concept or the story line of what we are experiencing as a community, it's a real world dynamic. Not everybody is responding in the same way.
Yep.
I think that we have an organ of media that tells a certain story, and then there is the real world reality that may not absolutely fit the circumference of that story, fit the circle line of that story, fit the thread of that story. So yeah, there's a part of our community who is responding in that way. They might be more of the media taglines that we see.
Yeah.
I think that there is a measure of resiliency to our people always. So that's what you're tapping into. Yes, we have been through experiences, where we've known these waters,
Mm-hmm.
where there seems to be nothing else but the dirt on the ground to really make a way with. But at the same time, I don't know if that's absolutely a good thing or the best thing for where we're at, because we want to be able to know how not just to make a way, but how to, again, use that word thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we do have a certain measure of our community who are resilient, who are magnificent, who are dynamic, and who will make a way out of no way, who
Mm-hmm.
will find the cracked door and find a way in and find a way to dress the room how it needs to be dressed for our survival. And then there is a good measure of us who do cope. And the dancing and the disconnection is a way of just getting through it without having to address and face the reality and the seriousness of what we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are the strategists, and there are those who are tacticians, and there are those who are going to position themselves for the coming onslaught. I'll say this is not something that has just emerged on the shorelines of our world. It's not something that just happened in 2025 or 2024 with an election.
Mm-hmm.
This is something in preparation of coming to talk with you. I went back with some of my notes, and I recognized as early as 2020 that I was beating the drum of change that is to come, beating the drum of universal change, of the shift in the spirit world, and the shift in what's going to be required of us in order to be able to be, centered and grounded and balanced and clear and present and productive
Mm-hmm.
people. And that shift was happening in the back, like the curtains were drawn and they were back there setting the stage, setting the scene. And it was happening with bristling activity, but we could see their feet moving around. You know how sometimes backstage the light is on and you can see people moving around. You can see silhouettes. We saw indicators and ideas. And when they pulled that curtain and went to bristling, we were all sitting back and they were giving us a little bit of, you know, food and a little bit of water. And they called it pandemic related assistance and things like that. And some of us, we suckled on it a bit. And I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm saying the conditions were laid out for us to be distracted
Mm-hmm.
with what was truly happening. And now the moves have been so heavy and so fast and so hard that we are having difficulty trying to reset ourselves into how we need to be moving today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the hopelessness is coming from, because we can't even really put our minds around what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But with those who have an ear, let them hear. Who those have the eye, open your eye and see. And the shift now, so now community becomes more important because it's going to take a collective of people to address the strength of what's happening. Nobody can do it on their own anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the takeaway from what we're experiencing. Nobody can do it on their own. We need strong communities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this community work, I believe, is so important.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. That was I appreciate that. I appreciate the calling out of the fact that multiple people, there are multiple perspectives and multiple experiences, right? I'm always straightforward in the fact that my prayer is that everyone will listen to I Have a Story to Tell podcast.
Hmm.
But I'm a Black woman living with Black family and Black community, and I'm
Yeah,
going to be talking to us, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So even within that, we are having different experiences. There are different perspectives of what is going on. And you made a good point about being careful about where you get your information from, what the media is sharing. So, taking that time to disconnect, again, going inward, for me, that's always going to be the key. That's Fayaya, that trusting. I trust my intuition.
Hmm.
I trust my gut feeling, not because it's mine, because I've honed it, because I've built relationship with it, because it talks to me the exact same way. So you share being able to listen and hear and see the changes that are taking place. We have to sometimes turn the TV off, turn the music off, turn the social media off, and just sit in silence, sit
Hmm.
and hear nature, sit and see what's reverberating through our bodies.
Yes.
And so the last piece that I'll share, and then I'll give it to you if you want to give us any closing thoughts. But you said there is a resiliency in us as a people.
Hmm.
There are those of us that know how to get it from the dirt, right? And so for me, I agree with you that that is not the goal, right? The goal is not to always be hit and restart and having to get it from the dirt.
Right.
But that's where my hoodoo comes in. That's where I know that I can tap into the shoulders of the ancestors that I stand on. That is where I'm reminded of the power of all that is not this created system, right? And so sometimes it's important for me, at least, to not only tap out of social media, tap out of this created construct of this society
Hmm.
of America. Because you said something a little while ago about this podcast being viewed in Senegal, and it's so interesting you said Senegal, and that's going to take another couple of hours. But I have a sister that I'm in relationship with that lives there with her husband, and
Oh, wow.
one of my to-do lists, and we were just exchanging communications.
See
The
that?
past couple of days, but she's from here. She's from the States, from North Carolina. And so, but it's understanding that even this dynamic, this paradigm, this structure that we see in this country is not it. Not saying it's not it, like not what we need to be striving for, but it's just not the only thing. It's
Hmm.
not the only option. It's not the only way to live. It's not the only experience to have, right? And so I think oftentimes we also can realize that when we tap into community, we can tap into others' experiences to let us see a world outside of, what our blinders have shown us.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
do you have any final thoughts for this episode one, part one? Because
I'm
we'll
like,
come back together.
I'm like, don't stop the conversation.
I
Don't
know.
stop the train. But I will say that in closing, that we each have responsibility over ourselves. We do and should be concerned about our own health and well-being, and we are, I'm sure. Uh, just understand that there are people around us who are going through insurmountable challenges and have no understanding of how just to survive. And there are lots of us who are trying to cope with life the best way that we know how. And we don't shame anybody because the challenges are very real.
Yeah.
And my invitation is inward. My invitation is not in consumerism, it's not in consumption, it's not in the superficial I can enjoy a good time. I can enjoy, abundance. I can enjoy all the things that life has to offer, the fruits of life. But at the same time, I know that where the essence of my value is in the internal person who I cultivate to be with. I'm
Mhm.
comfortable with being with the person who I look at in the mirror. I'm comfortable and I don't need to take a trip to find him. I
Mhm.
don't need to take a trip either virtually or in reality. I can sit in silence and listen to my heartbeat and understand who I am. And so my invitation is to people to get more closely in tune with who you are as an individual and the essence of your person because your person has value.
Mhm. Yes, that is an amazing place to land. Your person has value.
Yes.
Your person has value. Okay.
Yes.
Tell our audience where they can find you. Where can they find Sensei Kwabene
Listen,
and Dominion Dojo?
they got me out here, man. Please go to www.Dominyin. That's spelled uniquely. It's Dominyin, and you can go to the website and see why it's spelled that way. But Dominyin, Dojo.org. I'll say it again: www.Dominyin, Dojo.org. Or send me an email, Dominion Dojo, spelled the same way, at gmail.com. I'm Sensei Kwabene, your beneficial sensei. And as you know, we almost about to get up out of here. Us.
I love it. The doors of the dojo are
The
open.
doors of the dojo are open.
All right. Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for joining us for another episode of I Got a Story to Tell, the Niambi Kiesha podcast. We will
Yeah.
be back next week with another guest talking about community building and why it's important for us in this season. Until then,
Yes.
you guys take care. All right.